Hey guys, welcome back to Sanguinius 40K. A channel that's striving to give you the most out of your sons of Sanguinius on the tabletop. In today's video, I wanted to specifically just focus on Q&A. As mentioned, recently I've been wanting to do this for you guys, the community, just to share my thoughts and experiences. I recently put out a Facebook post in one of the Blood Angels groups, just asking, for any questions you guys might want answered. I kind of picked the most relevant ones because I didn't want to make this video, go too long, but I figured why not, you ask, I answer. So, without further ado, I'm going to just kind of go through a couple that really caught my eye, and we can kind of dive into it. So the first question that was asked, or at least that I put down here is, how do you feel when your team loses in a team match? So I'm someone who's been, gearing myself towards team matchups a lot more lately, just because I'm preparing to go to the WTC in less than a month. It's kind of crazy how quickly that's approached. And I recently actually played in a local team event where my team did all right, but we kind of struggled in a couple of matchups. So it saw us, I think, finish 2-2 on the weekend out of the 4 games that we played. Only losing one narrowly, and I think we may have made a mistake where it should have been a draw or whatnot, but it's okay. It was a fun event and we had a great time. But realistically, it's just about just a mindset change. That's all it really is. You can't look at it from a singles standpoint where, well, I did my job and I won my game, so my team's bad or anything like that. You really need to take that step back and realize that you win as a team, you lose as a team. It's a true group effort, and you're playing for the guy next to you. I can't stress that enough. I mean, I have a competitive background in sports, mainly hockey, and I was a goalie, so I understand the trials and tribulations of facing a lot of pressure all at once. And you can't beat yourself up too much in some times if you felt like you let your team down. And also on the flip side, you can't think too much about how your team let you down. I mean, of course, there's moments where, let's just say in theory, you're getting 20 O's every game, but your team's not winning the round. I mean, that could just be a pairing issue at that point where, maybe you're just getting good pairings consistently and they're not. And maybe you need to be the one that falls on the sword. And you kind of have to take a look in the mirror at times, which is kind of tough for a lot of people, especially when you're seeing a lot of success. So what I like to do, especially in a team situation, is of course, everyone wants favorable matchups. I mean, I'll be the first to admit it. If I said that I, was hoping to fall on the sword every round, I mean, no one wants to, but over the course of the weekend, I actually picked a couple of matchups where I thought, hey, you know what, if I can just take this, crazy shooting army on this light board off the table for the rest of my team, I think we can win the round. And I think we did that, for example, round 1, where I just got thrown into a gun line on a super light board and I was able to win the game still. But more importantly, my team won the round because they had better pairing. So, I mean, I feel like it's just about managing the loss rather than really looking at, if your team lost it and they let you down. So that's kind of what I would want to focus on more mentally. So, number 2 here I have put down is just shifting over, is the priest, the sanguinary priest, of course. He's still a must-have. So in my opinion, when we're talking units that really bring a lot of, just flexibility to your roster, so to speak, I really do think the priest is still incredible. I have a lot of tricks baked into my strategy in terms of how I use him and why, like gaining movement, purposely baiting someone to shooting my unit so I only lose 1 or 2 guys, just in order to be able to pull a couple back behind the wall so you can't shoot me anymore. Then all of a sudden next turn, I gain movement from it. My threat ranges increase. My board control kind of increases, or it didn't diminish because he was there. So there's a lot of reasons why I've kept him in the list. Now, a big shift for me mentally is he used to be more of I want to say, throwaway trading piece when he had the Teeth of Terror on him. As for those of you who know what he could have done, it was pretty intense. But on the flip side too, now I'm using him more of as a defensive piece, where he kind of has, more of still the same throwaway role, but not that same. I'd rather have him be a bit more utility in terms of a defensive standpoint, rather than being that, I'm going to go throw him in, trade something with Teeth of Terror. I feel like that 1 CP for that relic could be spent a bit better. And I still do spend it, but now it's the Armor Indomitus, for example, on him. So he's kind of like, I'm trying to bring back a couple of guys a turn. His Feel No Pains hopefully can come, clutch for me at some point. I mean, we all roll the dice and hope for the best. But then he can still kind of, perform that angel sacrifice and be a really key, role or target of yours to do that and look for it. Where then your other characters who may be more important in the roster can freely still actively do what they need to do. So I think he's really important in that sense for multiple roles. And the fact that you upgrade him, he brings back guys for free, you're not spending more CP. I think those 30 points, I believe it is, are just fantastic, I think, and go a really long way. So for me personally at this point, I can't see myself getting rid of him or taking him out of the list. The next question, a bit of a longer one, so bear with me here, but the next one is just how much CP do you aim to start with? I'll just answer that right now really quick. I aim to start with 1 to 2. I'm currently testing a list with 1 CP on purpose to kind of gear myself to less CP, to become more reliant on my CP management. And then going into the WTC, my list is going to start with 2. So it'll be a bit better for me in terms of my CP management. So I'm kind of stress testing my own capabilities with the management of the CP. And then the second part of this is with CP at a premium, how do you manage the CP, load for traits and relics versus having CP early? So like I kind of already touched upon, I'm starting the game with, almost as little CP as necessary, just because my army is not a CP extensive army the way I've built it. However, there are some tools and tricks that I do need. For example, early on in the game, Forlorn Fury, setting up a couple of areas of influence so I can take advantage of a heroic intervention with Sanguinary Guard, or if need be, an Angel Sacrifice. So it's like, it really depends on who I'm going into and what I'm up against. But I do feel like sometimes, I'm not going to say less is more in this situation, because it really isn't with the CP situation. However, it is really important, the fact that you're able to acknowledge what your army needs and when it needs it. And in this new CP hungry Nephilim mission pack, you have to realize that if you're also taking care of all of the parts that put the CP back into your CP account, by the top of turn 2, you're gonna have 3 CP potentially ready to rock and roll, and like 3 CP a turn is more than enough sometimes to do what you need, whether it be, like I said, maybe a cheeky transhuman to make sure you save a point, that heroic intervention, or that angel sacrifice. So I think it's really important to make sure that you're kind of always building or managing your CP load with how your army is going to approach the table on any given turn and preparing for that. So that's where the discipline does come into play, and just understand that, hey, you know what, a CP reroll is really nice right now, but next turn I'll have 3 CP, and that's good enough for that interrupt that I need and that potential heroic intervention. Just understanding little things like that, the nuances of the game. So the next question I have here is there any space for Blade Guard or aggressors to hold the middle? So that's actually a really good question, just because we've been seeing a lot of people, after Mr. Box with his, Centurions, they take the middle of the board. They're pretty tough to remove. You can't really approach them by charging because the Overwatch is mean, unless obviously you're a very durable unit. So, I mean, personally, in my opinion, the game, I think, has strayed away a bit more from that center of the board game. I mean, you do want to go to the center, but I feel like you almost want to go to the center with cheaper, faster units just to start initiating in a trade process, rather than I'm going to throw this 5-man unit to go hunker down and hold this for the whole game, if that makes sense. I just feel like with Oath of Moment kind of falling off slightly, a baked game plan of just, I go to the middle, kind of like I used to, I hate to say that, but kind of like I go to the middle, I'm going to continue, have this triangle area of influence where I'm just trading all game. If I'm going second, I basically win because of Stranglehold, Oath of Moment, and then whether it be, banners or retrieve Nephilim data. So that we kind of have gone away from that due to the obviously drop of Stranglehold. A lot of armies, used to take to the last on top of that. They can't anymore. So I really feel like a more dynamic, free-flowing game benefits, Blood Angels especially, and kind of just does what we do a lot better. So I mean, I don't think you want to limit yourself to that middle. However, throwing a cheap unit to the middle, such as an Assault Marine squad for 90 points with all the bells and whistles these days, so to speak, just kind of initiates the trade game, where if your opponent doesn't have shooting, now all of a sudden they have to bring something of value to the middle of the table, or at least another trading unit that, you you could take off their hands if they have to remove that unit, or else you just get a 12 on primary. So now I don't think it's a matter of holding the middle. I think it's a matter of just using the middle as a game state asset, if that makes sense as well. So going on to the next part, this is also a bit of a double whammy. A couple of people came in with this question, so I just kind of fused them together. So the first part of it is going to be, what are your go-to secondary picks, and how I decide, and where do I start essentially. So for me, it's about play style. First off, I'm going to keep this one a little bit short because I could talk about this one for probably 20 minutes in its own little seminar. So really simple. It's got to match your style. It's got to be your flow of how you want to approach the game. And at the end of the day, whatever units you want to put on the tabletop have to play into this game plan. So if you like Death Company and you think that is how you're going to play the game, Fury of the Lost, like all of a sudden is a very, very acceptable secondary to lean into with 3 squads of Death Company and a Death Company character. And as long as you are controlling, the state of interaction across the board, you're essentially getting a 15 points on that secondary. And there's almost nothing your opponent can do about it because you're just naturally playing the game and killing things with Death Company. And it's a lot of fun. I personally was going to start testing that list with the triple DC with Lamarty's, but I'm kind of in WTC mode, and I'm also going to Salt City. So I wanted to, practice what I'm probably going to be playing. And I thought it was just a little bit too soon for me to start testing a brand new concept with only about, a couple of weeks of preparation. I'm not that kind of person, but definitely something that's viable like that. If it's your game style and whatnot, then you can totally go in for like a more all-in combat approach in that sense. So I think it really depends on how you want to approach the game. So back to, where I personally start, it's like, I like my board control. I like my tools. I like my little tech pieces, like my eliminators. So for me, it's really important that I'm going to be, playing this more interactive style now, because that's just my game plan in Nephilim. So in terms of like taking a secondary such as Relentless Assault really plays into what I want to do, scores very well the way I play my game. Retrieve Nephilim data. My units are usually playing the different quarters of the game, so I'm going to be there anyway. So an 8 to 12 is very achievable for me. It also has to, suit how you're building your list. So for me, it works because I have a couple of Incursor squads. I have intercessors. I have scouts that could push forward early. I have assault marines, and then even late game, if I'm just playing the game naturally and taking the board, Sanguinary Guard can just walk into a zone and get my last one if they haven't already, or I can redeploy Incursors, et cetera, et cetera. I've built that redundancy into my list. So for me, that's kind of where I start, and just how I'm playing my game naturally to get the most out of every single unit, with multiple ways that they can score points, not just one specific role, if that makes sense. So the second part of this question is general game plan for new missions. Well, with the change to how we're scoring secondaries in terms of, multiple faction secondaries being allowed, which is, I think, very strong. I've also been testing out, heavily Death from Above. I think it's interesting. I think it really depends on the matchup, just because into faster armies, it could really throw off the tempo of the game. And I'm someone who's very big on game tempo and game state at all times. Because, being a Blood Angel player, I feel like you kind of always need to be in the driver's seat of the game if you're going to see the win, or at least, you are. And I say that in a confident way in terms of just how we are playing our game, because I know we've all been there, done that, where we kind of feel like we're on the back foot for most of the game and we're struggling, we're trying to punch up late, and then sometimes it's just not enough. So I feel like it depends on whether we're going first or second, which we don't know, of course. So it really depends on all in terms of matchup and how we're going to be playing into those matchups. And if we can afford to start more off the table to really take advantage of Death from Above and play into it. So for example, I recently played a test game against Death Guard where I knew they can't be really all over me. Turns, 1, 2, even 3, depending on how they're playing their game with their secondaries. So I could afford to actually put in a couple more units into reserve to really, when everything hits the table, I can start killing units, picking up 3 points a turn. If it's a character, it's an extra point. And if I can line up a couple of charges in safe locations, I don't mind throwing a unit in to seeing if I could, connect and get that extra bonus point for doing it in the same turn that I arrive. So it really depends on the matchup. Like, on the flip side, Harlequins, they could be all over you, top of 2 if they went first, and you can't afford to just have your entire army screened off the board. So it's really taking a step back, realizing what your opponent's army can do to you, and then obviously adapting and making the right call in the moment. But only you'll know how to do that with, you know, experience and maybe sometimes making that mistake. But, you know, you'll know when the right time is there to take it. So moving on to the next question, really simple one, which I really liked, and a lot of people have always asked me this, is, you know, character choices and their loadouts and why. So right now, I can't leave home without a chapter master, whether that be in my singles list. It's currently my captain, and he has Soul Warden for singles because that gives me a 5 appeal no pain against mortals. I love the efficiency of chapter master, and he himself has a relic blade and an infernal pistol. So it gives me just a bit more added punch. I'm not looking to do crazy damage with him, but he has the possibility to go pick up some chaff to help my army, you know, gain movement from certain things where he'll activate first, pick up the last, you know, 3-4 models that I have to, and then all of a sudden now I'm piling in 3, consolidating 3 with the other units I charged in, if that makes sense at a more, you know, high level approach of the game, just to gain more movement. And then for my team list, for example, I have Dante, similar role. He saves me CP, whether it be fighting on death or, you know, automatic angels sacrifice for free. He's also pretty good in terms of combat. He's even more punchy than my normal chapter master, and he's truly efficient in terms of that 9-inch chapter master, extra leadership, and the reroll ones within 9. So I mean, I think it's actually really good, and that warlord trait essentially pays for itself because of his you know, +1 CP for being the warlord. So I think it's really important to have that for me. Secondly, right now I've actually been toying with this, I think, really cool idea, which you know, could be a bad time, but I think it's been working pretty well for me so far. So that's my librarian, and he's actually shifted to mortal wound, or sorry, a bit more consistent with the mortal wounds in terms of having the blood angel tree. So now he has blood boil rather than psychic scourge. So blood boil is a bit more reliable to do an extra 2d3 mortals, or sorry, d3 mortals. So then he's dishing out 2d3 from smite and blood boil. And because he is still a chief librarian, which I do consider the upgrade to be very important, he now has the flexibility to, you know, cast an additional. He knows that extra power, which is even more important. And which the 3 powers he has now is Wings of Sanguinius for the double move. I'll explain why it's important in a second. The Unleashed Rage for exploding 6s, which I think is also very important, just so that when I'm going into something, it's just for sure gone, or I can charge multiple units and kill both because I have the volume to get through. And then the also one being, of course, like I mentioned, blood boil, to have a bit more consistent mortals, whether it be to finish off the last couple of wounds, whether it be to get through, you know, Catans, Abaddon, you know, Phoenix Lords, just those units that, you know, struggle, or that we've normally struggled with in the past to kill in multiple phases of the game due to their damage caps per phase. So the reason why Wings of Sanguinius is important, however, is because I've given him now the Rites of War and Visage of Death combo, which, you know, for all of you who have been following, you know, my journey or my lists along the way, has historically always been on the chapter master. But because of the nature of, I believe, some of the matchups in Nephilim and the ability to, you know, take advantage of having those psychic you know, powers just go off more reliably, because either people are going hard on psychers or not at all, he's now able to have this, you know, objective flipping capability at not only 12 inches with an advance, but 12 with an advance, and now another 12-inch move. So this guy has a potential of, I mean, we can just do quick math here, 31 inches of being able to just essentially take an objective late game anywhere on the board, and you still play him defensively like you normally would, like my chapter master in the past, to make sure whatever objective I'm on, I'm going to be holding. And then you need to be careful with how you're protecting your objectives now, because at any given point, if you don't have a deny, or if I'm able to get out of deny range, I'm just stealing objectives from you, especially late game, to either flip it for a 12, or late game to deny you and give you a 4 or a 0, depending on the mission. So I think it's really crucial to how we can approach the game. And then lastly, the Sanguinary Priest, I already touched on early in the video, so I won't dive into it too much, but essentially just making sure that he's a bit more of a durable piece. Really great for the Angel Sacrifice with the Armor Indomitus, and of course, Selfless Healer, just because the free revive is just fantastic, I feel, in my army. So moving on, we're going to go to the last competitive question, then I got a fun one after. I heard this one from, I believe this was my last YouTube video. So just break down my thoughts versus -1 damage armies. Iron Hand Dreads or Death Guard was the example. So I played a lot of Death Guard in my time, when it was with the 5 of Feel No Pain, which could spike and was kind of wild. And then of course, tons of games against the -1 damage version within, you know, the 9th edition codex when it came out. And the one thing that I could always rely on was my volume of attacks. And the biggest factor, actually more into Death Guard, was just the fact that you just need to dictate the terms of engagement make sure you're measuring out their threat ranges and understanding where areas of the board they can impact. Because Death Guard has a lot of abilities to, whether it be fight last or just shut down our abilities to charge in, whether with the Foul Blightspawn, for example. So we need to be very careful about more how we're interacting with them rather than the damage. I feel like people get very caught up in the whole, oh, half my damage is gone. But realistically, we could go into a squad of, 5 or even 10 Plague Marines and take a crazy chunk out of them with a combination of some shooting and then 7 Sanguinary Guard, for example, with exploding 6s, like I explained with Unleash Rage. Because at the end of the day, with swords, I know we're wounding on 3s, but they have 6-up saves. And every wound that essentially is going through, or every 2 wounds that go through, is just picking up a guy. So it's like the volume is there to just kind of push through that unfortunate -1 damage, which, yes, in theory, on paper makes it sound like a bad matchup, but due to the mobility, we can get around it. And then the other example here was the Ironhand Dread heavy lists. That's a bit more difficult because then that's where, my approach with the, Las Fusils and multi-meltas that I've still kind of brought into my list, because I believe it's 6 Inferno Pistols, and 4 Las Fusils in I believe it's my 1 singles list. And then I have a couple more Melta shots in my teams list. I'm still able to play into them. And because of how consistent our Inferno Pistols are, because they hit on 2s, rerolling 1s, now wounding on 3s, they tend to kind of push through because they go to AP5 in the assault doctrine. So I mean, they're still not getting a save unless they pop some sort of invul, and even then, it's like a 5-up or it could be a 6-up depending on what they're running. I don't really find it to be a crazy hard matchup. And the thing with dread heavy lists, yes, there's always that opportunity where you don't roll well or whatnot. So why don't we get rid of the whole approaching it with damage and think about approaching that game a little bit differently and thinking, all right, if they're deployed there and they need to, reach XYZ by turn 2 or 3, why don't we use our other, more skirmishing units, as I call them, like, eliminators, scouts, speeders, to kind of hem them into their zone and kind of move block them so they can't really get involved with you as fast as they'd want to. That's been the big downside of armies like that. And whether it be dreads from Iron Hands or just any dreads or anything that doesn't fly, that's kind of something that we need to leverage in terms of, yeah, I can't interact with those units as well as I would like to, but why not stop them from interacting with us as fast as possible? Like, I've played many games against the Avatar of Cain, and the whole half damage thing is just a nightmare because then Meltas don't even really do much either sometimes. If you roll like a 3 or whatever, or a 4, it's just like, okay, I did 2 damage. And he's T8, so it's tough to wound as well, and it's swingy. We don't really have, reroll wounds baked into our Meltas and whatnot. So it's like, you really have to think, how do I approach that then? And it's just a really simple answer of just hemming him in an area, making sure he can't interact on the board that I want him to interact with. And then, yeah, he'll get there eventually. You can only throw so many units in front of him, but by then you've scored points, you've interacted with different areas of the board in a more timely manner. And now you've racked up enough points to make sure that even late game, he can't just take over a model like that, just as an example. So the last question for today, guys, this is a great question. I thought it was really fun. If playing a casual game against friends, what kind of list would I run at 1,000 points? So, I mean, I personally have never played a combat patrol game, I think it's called, or an incursion size game, which I think I really should, to take a little break from the 2K comp 40K that I've been doing. But personally, I am a huge fluff guy. I've said this like a million times, but like right now I'm even more hyped on the fluff than ever. I'm excited for hopefully, in the future, the Codex Space Marines to be coming out. Fingers crossed to see when that drops with some more fun. But for me personally, it's got to start with one of our named characters who you kind of, who you've looked up to in the stories, whether it be Dante or Mephiston. For a 500-point game, I'd pick one of them and then kind of roll with, some cool fluffy units, even bring a ball predator that escorts them on the battlefield. Might not be super efficient, but it's a lot of fun. I could tell you that for sure. And then of course, to just kind of hone in on this one, which is the 1,000-point question. I've read a lot of the novels in recent years, couple years now. And I thought it was always really cool if I had like a list with Mephiston, Dante, a squad of Hellblasters, because that's directly from one of the books. And then again, bring in like a ball predator, or if you wanted to bring Dante, a librarian dreadnought, if you wanted to kind of change it up a bit. I just think there's a lot of fun units that can keep it casual, keep it friendly, still is going to be quite strong because we know how good our units are. And if you thought about bringing Sanguinary Guard, for example, I would still, but not as like a 2 7-mans or 1 7 or whatever. I'd bring in like the bare minimum. So I'd bring in a nice 4-man, make it really fluffy, put them in reserve, make them come from arrival, trying to hit an 8-inch charge, or bring them down to, protect Dante. Just something really cool and really fun. And I think it would keep everyone engaged to the point where, everyone's having a good time. So anyway, that's going to be my thoughts and takes on what I'm doing with answering some of these questions for you guys. Hopefully this was helpful. As always, please like, share, and subscribe. The more comments, the merrier, because the more comments I hear with constructive criticism, the better I can get at doing these for you guys. So as always, thank you again for all the support. Hope you enjoyed, and we'll see you in the next one. Bye-bye.